Love podcasts, hate nonsense is the PoliticsJOE podcast. Earliest podcast of all time, just for you guys. Don't podcast until we've had our coffee.
And your method dressing as well, with your hat.
Yes, I did. I was like, I'll wear a hat because this is actually so dull. I cycled to work and I wore a helmet. I was like, my hair looked dumb. So I chose a hat. And it was unintentional, but it's very appropriate because this is the special bonus, extremely early feed, early reaction to the US election as it stands.
How is it standing, Ed?
How is it standing? So right this moment, Donald Trump has 246 electoral college votes. Kamala Harris has 187. So Trump is creeping towards the 270 that he needs to take back the White House. He's won Georgia and North Carolina, having flipped Georgia. So that's the state of play as it stands. We're not going to get into like the granular detail, like the play-by-play that you'll see on CNN or will have seen on CNN, because you might be watching this tomorrow, and we don't want this to have an hour of shelf life. Laura, what are your... We both went to sleep quite early.
Yes.
At 9:30, so we weren't doing the nerd thing. Did you see Torsten Bell warning against staying up all night?
No.
It's quite a funny line about like only losers stay up all night and watch. It doesn't make a difference, which I thought was quite an un-Torsten Bell thing to say.
But he's right though, because in the US election, I mean, the states that get called first are the ones that you like. I'm not staying up to watch like
New York.
Yeah, be called Democrat.
No. It's just a compelling hour of television. Few hours of television. When you woke up, and talk me through when you woke up and you saw the news.
Yeah, well, when I woke up, CNN was predicting that Trump was going to win all 7 of the swing states, and then since then, like you said, Georgia and North Carolina have been called for Trump. I think possibly one of the most surprising things to come out of this morning is what a broad coalition have voted for Trump, and 1 in 3 ethnic minority voters have voted for Trump. Larger gains with the Latino community than in 2020, a larger share of Gen Z than in 2020, and he's doubled the vote amongst black men. I think that's interesting because back in 2016, when we during the first time Trump ran, it was seen that he'd won off of the back of like this left behind working class kind of white lash, a white male working class voter. But that doesn't seem to be the kind of tide he's riding right now. What do you make of that?
I would disagree. I think it's the base that he's riding. I think it's fundamentally the base of Trump's vote. And I wonder if his presidency will have normalised Trump and made him more palatable to those people, to the people who weren't at the sharp end of his policies. Might have thought, oh, well, that actually wasn't that bad, and I'm not happy with how the economy is now. So I don't like Biden, I don't like Harris, and Trump wasn't that bad for me personally. So I wonder, so I think I'll go back. I think that maybe speaks to I don't think most voters aren't typically very ideological. They're very much, I'm all right, Jack, this is if I think this will personally improve my lot, regardless of what this will do for my community at large, that's how people are voting. I don't think people are voting out of concern for their feelings as like a Latino woman or Latino man. People are voting out of their individual circumstances. I think as well, the Biden presidency has been affected a lot by the COVID recovery and general inflation. And it seems like people are, whether he's the cause of that or not, people are placing that blame with him and feel like they are worse off in their paychecks, what they can buy at the supermarket, than they were in 2016 under the Trump presidency. And there's been no clean break with the Biden administration, as in Harris was part of that administration. She has to answer for all of Biden's policy. I think she should have been well within her rights to put more distance between her and Joe Biden and said, yeah, if I was at the wheel, this is what I'd do. But she really hasn't made that much of a play. There's been very little positive policy platform. It's like it's a much more existential. This is why Trump will be bad, not why. Here's why it would be good for me.
It kind of felt that if Biden in 2016 was running on a vote for me is a vote to save democracy, democracy on the line. Kamala Harris was running on abortion is on the line and abortion rights are on the line, and was expecting perhaps women to turn up and vote in greater numbers on that issue than it looks like they have. Do you think that if Biden had stepped aside initially, didn't say that he was going to run for a second term, that we would be in the position that we are right now?
It's maybe we could be in, but I think you'd have. I wonder if the Democrats would feel better about losing, as in if we gave it our best shot, because they've kind of had this election campaign with one hand tied behind their back, with Joe Biden not stepping aside till 100 days before the election, and there wasn't really a contest in the Democratic Party about what do we want this party to look forward. We're just having continuity. Biden, if there was an open contest, you might have seen people like Josh Shapiro or Andy Bashir come forward and have some interesting ideas. Biden's been part of the establishment, or not the establishment, but people's memory of presidential politics since 2008. That's a long time. That's a long time to be leading the vanguards of the Democratic Party. I wonder if they would have done better about with some of an injection of new blood, new ideas, and they probably would feel better if they lose. There is that maybe we could have done it differently thing, which can't feel very good. I think what is interesting is how thin the margins are in the popular vote at the moment, and you will have, because if Trump wins, Trump will present this as a total embrace of America, of Trumpism. But it's actually quite a fragile coalition, a fragile majority. Kind of similar to Labour's win, not as egregious as in he's not only going to win 33% of the vote and get unlimited power, but there isn't necessarily a massive endorsement of what Trumpism stands for. Not all Trump voters are embracing his authoritarian tendencies, his contempt for democratic norms and ideals, his embrace of authoritarian leaders. This isn't that, I would say.
Really?
I think proportionally, you can't say that all Americans want this.
I think it's interesting because the New York Times were predicting that he could be the first Republican since George W. Bush to win the popular vote. And I think if that is the case and he wins all 7 swing states, I think for a convicted felon to achieve that, it actually is quite a ringing endorsement of what people want. And I think I think he would take it.
You'd still be roughly 50-50. That's my point.
I guess. But then I guess you could say that about like all American elections are kind of won on very thin margins.
Yeah, but I think it would be. But then I wonder if that then speaks to it's this is such a unique circumstances. Maybe only Trump could do this. Maybe only Trump has the unique personality and attraction to various coalition partners to overcome those things. If you look at the people in his image who might want to follow him, people like J.D. Vance or maybe Elon Musk, or even someone like Ted Cruz, you would think that the convicted felonies would be insurmountable obstacles. And I'd wonder if lightning strikes twice in that regard. If you do get someone else who can just overcome any obstacle, or if this is just a unique Trump.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. That I think no one else with the policy platform that he's kind of endorsing, I don't think could win in the same way that Trump looks like he might be. And there was quite an interesting article you shared with me from the New York Times yesterday. If Trump wins, here's why. And one of the key elements as to why he would win is just his personality, his charisma. Like, it's
his riz, as you said, Neil, the other day, that made Sean and I feel 1,000,000 years old. No, you're right. He has a unique appeal. His charisma, his showmanship. He is like, you see him at rallies, and he is like an old school like music hall performer, and he just talks, and people are absolutely captivated by it.
Yeah, it's the things he said that that would wreck every other politician's career. It doesn't wreck his.
If Trump wins, this is also imagine in like 2 hours, Kamala wins the blue wall, and all this is completely redundant. So we've done the thing. We've done the thing that we wanted to avoid. If Trump wins, is this just clear the explanation of people are not happy with the state of the country and therefore they did not vote for the incumbent? Is it as simple as that?
I think if you look at the swing states in particular and the kind of Rust Belt states, I think probably speak the best to that idea of not being happy with the direction that the country is heading in, and why figures like Donald Trump are very appealing. And it's quite interesting because there's a really good book by Dr. Fiona Hill, who was Trump's Russia advisor in 2016, and now she is leading the Strategic Defense Review for the Labour government. But she wrote this book called There's Nothing for You Here, where she kind of sees Trump as a symptom of industrial decline, which is like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those states. And she says that it's with Russia, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, with the UK and the US suffering it from political leadership, that populism offers like a comforting solution. It's saying that, in fact, actually, here's a very simple solution to all your problems, whether that's Brexit, whether that's Trump. And right now, it is Trump in the United States.
Jon Stewart said on the Ezra Klein podcast that he thinks the battle in politics now globally is the conflict between, he used woke and unwoke as a shorthand, putting Trump into the unwoke category along with Putin and Orban, people like that. And he said, he was talking about the appeal of the unwoke is the simple answers. It's comforting. It's people are looking for simple, easy answers to really quite complex solutions. As in, if you look at to Americans, the economy isn't performing well. What's easier to understand? That's Joe Biden's fault, or is it a series of geopolitical overlapping circumstances, including the fallout from COVID, the war in Ukraine, or is it just Joe Biden hates real working class people like you? Yeah,
I think it's also it is a failure of the woke, or a failure of like the liberal Democrats. Yeah. I'd say.
I don't like woke and unwoke as a shorthand.
No,
it's what he used, but I don't think it's,
because I actually think it's wrong as well. Because if you're thinking of woke and unwoke just being whether you're using progressive language or non-progressive language, it's much more material than that.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at it as a failure of the liberal democratic state, it's much more easier to understand why people are turning to people like Trump. Because if you think about how 2008 and the financial recession was handled by centrist governments, like, it was awful and it made us all worse off. And that, I think, is actually a very good reason to be angry at the state of play and the state of kind of what to Trump voters would be the elites that have been managing our governments.
And then that anger is exploited by more nefarious actors. It could have been exploited by people who aren't racist and who don't want to flout democracy.
Yeah, Occupy Wall Street, they tried.
I was speaking to a student recently, and he said he got into politics when, I think it was during lockdown, or he was working a job by himself, and he had long hours by himself, just by himself. He's like, I'll start listening to podcasts about the news. He didn't consume that much news before, and he started listening to, I think it was James O'Brien's podcast. And we were talking about that was like a flip of a coin.
Yeah.
He could have ended up a much worse guy, depending on what. If he'd gone straight to like Andrew Tate's podcast or something like that, the news. he could have gone down a different rabbit hole.
Yeah, or even Joe Rogan's.
Even Joe Rogan's. He wouldn't be the young centrist dad that I met.
Well, I think that's interesting because it's looking like Trump's kind of podcast strategy has played off, that perhaps those young men who are traditionally politically unengaged, hard for pollsters to reach because they aren't picking up their phones, but are very easy for people like Joe Rogan to reach, that strategy has paid off.
It's also about motivating people to vote, I suppose, as in those young men would be quite hard to persuade. Even if Kamala Harris had gone on Joe Rogan, I think it would be hard asked to bring them over from Trump to Harris. But it's about getting those people to vote at all. And if he's managed to mobilise those people, then that's pretty remarkable. We've solicited some questions on the subreddit.
Yeah.
If you aren't on the subreddit, too bad. Sorry about that. But you should be, because it's the best subreddit on the internet. So we solicited some questions to talk about, and some of them were not good.
Needs to do better, guys.
Yeah, every time I ask for some sort of audience interaction, you always disappoint me. So we have a question from you/here for controversy. How do you envisage the relationship between the USA? Okay, well, you phrased this really badly. so your syntax is off. I'm going to paraphrase you. How do you envisage, or maybe they did do it right. How do you envisage the relationship between the USA and the UK will develop with a Harris victory, considering Labour have sent support to Democrats? Will we see a trade deal any time soon? It was the use of the word envisage that has really thrown me off there. So Keir Starmer sat down with Trump, I think in September he visited to DC, and seemingly Trump liked him. Seemingly Trump said to him at the dinner, we're friends now. So they seem to have a positive relationship from there. Seemingly he really likes David Lammy.
I've seen that. Offered him a second portion of dinner.
Oh yeah, which is apparently... I really hate like the microanalysis of like these interactions of Donald Trump offered David Lammy a second plate, and that means that US-UK relationship good. Seemingly David Lammy is very good at dealing with American politicians, like is quite a gregarious personality, is good at the backslapping and the handshaking that goes on in America. So seemingly they're on pretty solid relationships. They're asking about Harris as well. We're talking about Trump. That was poor. Well, does that seem slightly redundant? So we've updated your question.
I actually am sure whether it would make much of a difference whether it's Harris or Trump to what the US-UK relationship looks like, because I think if like the idea of a special relationship between the US and UK was kind of coined in the 60s with Winston Churchill saying that the United States and Great Britain having this special relationship was essential for global peace. That's just not true anymore. The UK is such a micro player in comparison to the global superpower of the United States. We actually don't have influence. It's not a 50-50 relationship. We don't have influence or sway over them. It's very much a one-way street, I think. And I think a lot of other countries also view themselves as having a special relationship with the United States. Like we aren't special to them. No,
it is pretty extraordinary. I wrote an essay when I was studying in North Carolina, and the title was "How did the Suez?" It was like, did the Suez Crisis ruin? How did the Suez Crisis affect the US-UK relationship before 1952? And the first comment was, well, it certainly didn't affect it before that. And I was like, you bitch, you horrible lecturer. No, I think your point there's absolutely bang on. I think UK politicians and governments are desperate to cling on to any sort of some spectre of influence on the world stage. And what you want to feel important, you want to have the first visit from the new president there. And I think they would see Harris as maybe a kindred spirit. Globally, I suppose, if you have people like, within Europe, you have people like Giorgia Meloni at the forefront now, it's maybe more difficult to look for in the West, more like liberals, left liberals. And so you would be desperate to kind of forge that relationship and look at the oncoming rise of populist right.
Yeah.
And say, no, we're actually fine. Trump seemingly likes the UK. His mum was Scottish, and he has some
famously opening a second golf course in Scotland.
So he loves that. He's creating. That's what there's the large Scotland is the most pro-Trump country in Western Europe.
I saw that. Was it 18% of Scots?
That's 24, but
okay,
it's
higher.
It's certainly between those two figures.
Wow.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. Do you think that's just the heritage tie there, like how the Irish love Joe Biden?
No, I don't know what you can chalk it up to. Maybe it's. Maybe it's affection for refreshing free speech, I guess. I don't know. I would be curious to see what it was. Maybe it is heritage. Maybe we are lame of being like. Then it's not. Or maybe it's literally like he creates jobs in Scotland.
Yeah.
He has his 2 golf courses, and so people are directly employed by his business. Yeah. But I wonder if so many are affected that a quarter of that quarter of Scots are in favour. On that note, someone called u/intrepid-ad1381 has asked, are you or I related to Trump through a Scottish family? Are either of you supporting him due to nationalistic loyalty? I'm not related to Trump through a Scottish family.
Neither. I think isn't his mum from like the Outer Hebrides? Like,
yep.
Which is
my family's never left the Central Belt.
My family's never left like 5. So.
We are 2 deeply inbred people. We need to expand our gene pool pretty rapidly.
That's why we moved to London.
Just anyone from a mile away. I also don't appreciate your essentialism in suggesting that we Scots are so sheep-like that we just see someone with any Scottish heritage.
Maybe he saw that poll though.
Maybe. That is a good point. Harris is presumably a Scottish surname as well.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, why aren't you asking that?
Yeah.
Why aren't you asking that? You/the Firebat asked, if Trump is elected, beating another female candidate from the Democrats, would that force a re-examination of America's willingness for female leaders compared to the rest of the Western world? I think this is very interesting in that Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris aren't and weren't like for like candidates, and they didn't run the similar campaigns. And I do wonder how much of why Hillary lost and why Kamala is projected to lose, I suppose, at this point, are to do with gender and, I guess, Kamala's race. What would your thoughts be on that?
I think that the role of president in the United States is a highly masculinized office, as in the qualities and characteristics that we associate with being a good leader tend to be very masculine traits. And you see in previous elections, even when it's 2 men running against each other, the ideas of masculinity, sexual prowess often come up on the campaign trail. Like I don't remember, but when you look back to George Bush versus Kelly, that throughout that campaign, George Bush was being portrayed as this kind of having cowboy masculinity, frontier mindset. He'd often be on his ranch in boots, in a cowboy hat, very ideals of American masculinity being played up to the voter because that's what's appealing. But then you would look at John Kelly, and often he was being portrayed as being this kind of feminine... John Kerry, as this kind of feminine, like, soy boy character. So I think it makes it doubly hard for women because you have to basically present yourself as being quite masculine in certain ways. And I think the difference between Kamala and Hillary is Hillary was kind of running this campaign of like, I am women, hear me roar, smash this glass ceiling. Kamala Harris, I felt, downplayed it a bit, definitely did downplay it. She wasn't running in the same way. It was, I saw that, the Veep line, like, they can't know I'm a woman. It felt almost at some points, it was verging towards that for the reasons that that I've laid out.
And also as well, as a black woman, there's two, I suppose, radical elements of Kamala Harris that American voters would have to contend with. I think in going forwards, the Democrats would be more reluctant to nominate a woman for the presidency because, rightly or wrongly, Americans haven't voted in a woman twice. So maybe the country isn't ready for that, which I think is a pretty astonishing thing in 2024, when you have seen female leaders across the world. I think you're right, though, but I think there is a real machismo to American politics. It's about who do you want to drink a beer with, who do you want to toss a football around with. But then I wonder, is that just molded by, there just hasn't been one yet? So it would be inherently feminized if there was a female occupant, which and we just don't have the. You can't imagine a female president because there hasn't been one.
I mean, I think it's definitely compounded by the fact that it's directly elected. Like, we've had female leaders in the UK, I think, because we have a parliamentary system, which I think is a bit more forgiving towards women in higher positions of power.
What was the Hillary Clinton's theme song in 2016? It was like, so it was Roar. It was Roar by Katy Perry.
Yeah.
And has Kamala Harris had a similar theme song this campaign?
I mean, I think if anything, it was Freedom by Beyonce. Oh yeah. Which I thought was like a very good, like, much more stirring, I have to say, than Roar by Katy Perry.
I think Katy Perry and Hillary Clinton are now occupy the same space in my brain now.
Yeah, they're kind of like
kind of cringe.
But kind of also representative of kind of a bygone era of feminism, of that very like liberal,
quite like girl boss. It's literally girl boss.
Yeah.
Like, I think I say girl boss all the time in the podcast. I've never once said it.
Yeah.
Earnestly. Maybe that's sexist of me. Maybe I should be celebrating the girl bosses, the female people in charge. U/hyphen has asked, do you see a causal relationship between Trumpism and broader... Fucking hell. Oh my God, I'll do that all again. Do you see a causal relationship between Trumpism and broader populism in the EU? Why isn't it too much to expect populist rhetoric to atrophy in the aftermath of a Harris victory? We talked about this yesterday when we saw this, and it's... you touched on it there when you were talking about post-industrial societies. I don't think there's a causal relationship between Trump and populist ideas. I think they're symptomatic of the same things. Like, Trump happened after we voted for Brexit. There is this emotional turmoil happening in these countries in a post-industrial society as we're thrashing around for a place in the new order, and people are looking for easy solutions, like people are told leaving the EU will make your life better. People are told you vote for Trump and it will make your life better. Ignore kind of the outrageous lies people are telling about this. And it's also quite difficult for, if you're the other side, being the naysayer isn't fun. Actually, I think you saw him in the Conservative leadership contest between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, when Liz Truss was saying, all these radical ideas are going to send the economy skyrocketing. And Rishi Sunak was standing there going, this is insane. Like, this is going to crash the economy. And he was absolutely right. But he seemed shrill when he was doing it. There was like a telling someone, no, that doesn't work. Yeah. Once you get an idea into your head, someone tells you it's a bad idea, that you're not going to like. You're not going to like that person.
I think sometimes as well there can be, from the centre left, like the Democrat establishment, there can be a kind of dismissal of people that are voting for Trump and the grievances they have as, well, they're just being racist, they're buying into racism. But I think if you work at a car manufacturer in Pennsylvania that's being threatened with closure because Ford can produce these cars for much cheaper in Latin America or East Asia or wherever, and Trump is saying, I will put tariffs on importing cars as soon as I'm in office, day one in office, versus Kamala Harris, who's saying, oh, well, in 10, 20 years' time, my new job plan will pay off. You're going to vote for the candidate that's promising to save your job tomorrow rather than in 10 years' time.
Yep. Why isn't it too much to expect populist rhetoric to atrophy in the aftermath of a Harris victory? Because it's not like, say Harris comes back now, it's not like the people in the Trump campaign are now like, oh, fair play, I hope she does well. Mm-hmm. It's within their interest for her not to succeed and for them to exploit every single mistake she might make. Now, you've seen it with the Labour government, how the right has exploited every single thing that the government has made a mistake on. You've seen how willing they were to exploit the Southport attacks, things like that. They're not being good chaps. It's not the good chap theory in action. It is people are looking for grievances to exploit next time round. Because the energy, if Trump lost, the energy behind Trump doesn't dissipate. He might not be the candidate next time. He would be really old if he loses. He'd be like 82. But the forces around him and that energy would find another vector.
It's also been, the forces around him have also been incredibly successful in fracturing the landscape in terms of people now in America aren't even operating on the same plane of facts. They hold completely different truths and premises. So I think it's much more difficult than just, well, if Kamala wins, she can just end that rhetoric by governing well.
No, it is interesting. It's kind of alarming, the casualness with when you watch interviews with Americans, the disputed facts. There was a woman on Channel 4 News this morning, I think she was in Las Vegas being interviewed, and she mentioned, so she just casually says, oh, so I don't believe that Biden won the 2020 election. And you're like, well, how do you even begin to have a conversation with this person? If they are not willing to believe the most basic fact, how do you even begin to? Because there's quite like a pearl clutchingness about people should compromise, people should reach across the aisle. But if one side of the aisle is disputing the facts of democracy, how the hell do you begin to compromise?
Definitely. I mean, in the world they're operating in, like all evidence is falsified, and you can't. They're not having or willing to take part in a good-natured debate. And I actually think this plays into something that Trump's former Chief of Staff, John Kelly, said that, who I was mistaken for John Kerry earlier, John Kelly said that his former boss met the general definition of a fascist. Do you think it's fair to call Trump a fascist?
That's interesting. I would maybe say far right, hard right over fascist. I think he is certainly sowing the seeds, and I think he's the potential to do it. But I think, I don't know. I suppose what is the distinction at that point between what I'm saying? What do you think?
I think that I think it's like what you're saying, the seeds are there, that there's kind of a groundwork being laid for something. And I think it just depends whether, when Trump is in power, if Trump is in power, what he would then do with the foundations that have been laid. Like, for example, there's so much talk about Project 2025, which is the Heritage Foundation, this big US think tank that's kind of been around since the Reagan days, which makes these big policy documents, platforms, and kind of hands them to the president and says, implement these. And often they do. And I think one of the kind of things at the center of that project is to replace government at all levels, civil service, with Trump loyalists. And I would say that is, if that's successful, that's amounting to a form of institutional capture, which I think definitely is one of the pre-foundations towards entering.
But I think that's the point, is that we're maybe on the bit before fascism.
Yes,
I guess. I think, but then that's as dangerous. If we're kind of tempering it, being like, well, he's not actually a fascist yet. Yeah, but
pre-fascist.
He's a proto-fascist. The yet is doing a lot of heavy lifting. But also, as well, I think there is still some institutional opposition to Trump becoming a fascist dictator. It's not like he doesn't have total control of the military.
Yeah.
The military isn't a sort of Franco-esque loyal group to Trump. It's still just the American military. There is still people within electoral politics are firmly opposed to him. It's not like he at the moment he can't run for a third term. If he tries to overturn that would be a massive constitutional amendment. And in his last term, the Supreme Court did sometimes show its willingness to vote against Trump's interests. I think he has the potential to veer into fascism or authoritarianism, but he at the moment is not yet. He's not doing it yet. Basically,
I think it's like what you said about he hasn't captured the military. They said in 2020 if Trump wasn't going to go peacefully, they would escort him out.
Yep.
I think as well, one of the things that would be interesting to see is if Trump is in power, if he then decides to go after his political opponents with financial penalties or prison sentences, because that would also be another kind of quite obvious sign.
So just on that point as well, I think what doesn't make him a fascist is it's not like he has an image of America that he's trying to remake America into. He's interested in Trump being president.
Yes.
He's not interested in Trumpism being the constitutional template for the United States. I think he's still quite happy to, within the rules of the game, play to a certain extent.
Yeah.
He hasn't mapped out, I would like the government of the USA to be done like this, abolishing states' rights.
Definitely.
Things like that. I think he's Trump wants Trump to be president and he wants to be rich.
Yes, agree. The preconditions he thinks he's laying are for the Trump presidency, not for any form of ideology. Actually, Ollie did quite an interesting interview with Richard Seymour, who's like an author and writes a lot about fascism, which we published yesterday, which spoke about this in quite a lot of depth. So I would say check that out if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean's just come in.
Good morning.
He's very late.
Very, very late.
How are you feeling?
Not weird.
Sean got vaccinated yesterday and it's not going well. So, is there anything else we'd like to touch on?
I think there was a question earlier about what would this mean for the UK?
Yep.
A Trump or Harris presidency. I think the biggest kind of impending threat that a Trump presidency actually would have would be its impact on the war in Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that has much more profound impacts for the rest of Europe as well, because Trump said he would, if he's president, he would strike a deal day one. And
that deal? Here's the Donbass.
Concessions. And I think that's what Ukrainians are terrified of, but also any state that's bordering Russia, because he's essentially changed the rules-based order there.
Yeah,
you can violate these national boundaries, and that is totally fine.
And his contempt for NATO.
His contempt for NATO.
As well.
Yeah, the threat to, essentially without American arms and funding the Ukrainian army, they can't continue this war with Russia. Also, interestingly, that Trump's first impeachment was about Ukraine. It was about him pressuring President Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden, and by withholding military aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, I think it was something as well I'd like to touch on is the Republicans' embrace of the Cheneys. Sorry, not the Republicans, the Democrats.
Yeah.
The opposite actually. I wonder if that has just made Republican ideas more palatable. If you are ceding ground, it's not like the Cheneys have shifted leftwards by any means. It's just been like the Democrats now stand for the same things that the Cheneys did 20 years ago. And remember how much either remember how much you hated George Bush. This party does not stand for that. Does not stand for opposition to the Bush administration anymore. Or it's been like, oh, well, I like their ideas, so I'm just going to still stick with the Republicans. It hasn't. I would be very surprised if it has brought any Republicans over to the Democrats, sort of in the same way that when we talk about right-wing parties, when they embrace the ideas of the far right, just legitimize the ideas of the far right. If you are taking people from the same party as Donald Trump, you're just showing that it is acceptable.
Yeah, you're shifting the Overton window.
Shifting the Overton window. Should we have where we are now? So we get a sense of what we're doing. Okay, so at the moment, Donald Trump has 246 electoral college votes. He's got 51.2% of the popular vote. Kamala Harris has 194 electoral college votes, 47.2% of the popular vote, and there are 10 results to go. Well,
Trump supporters.
Pennsylvania for Trump.
Oh, fuck, okay.
Yeah, famously the state you need to win the White House.
Fox has called Pennsylvania for Trump, which is not...
Called him as president.
Fox has called him for president?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And Trump supporters are waiting at campaign headquarters in Florida for Trump to come and speak.
Good Lord. Okay. Well, that might have been... I feel that's been building. Anything else to say?
No.
Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for listening. We will be back later today for Kevin Badenrock's PMQs appearance. And we will have some analysis. I've got an interview coming up in the afternoon as well. So yeah, you stay locked into the PoliticsJOE channel page on YouTube, and just don't look anywhere else. Just keep your finger hovering over where a new video appears, and you will be rewarded at least 3 times today.
Yeah, and if you're American, leave a comment and let us know how you're feeling.
Yeah, definitely. You could use our subreddit as a sort of therapy page.
Yeah.
To hash out some ideas. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you imminently